Okay, yours should be recording now.
Slob on my knob.
My corn on the cob. Welcome. Why do I have my headphones on? We always have these great intros.
Game theory.
What's up? This is Matt Patton. Welcome to Game Theory. I do hope you all enjoy.
But that's just a theory. A game theory.
Sorry about the
Thanks
reverb.
so much for watching.
Sorry about the reverb. What's up? You may notice I'm holding the mic weird. That's because there's no other way to do it. And it's going to seem super official and real. Today, our review is of The Meg, starring Jason Statham. I want to welcome you all. What did you think of The Meg?
Oh, man. The Meg was just something else. And, screw all those critics who call it, like, B-movie fodder. It's the best movie I've seen this year. It's probably my favorite movie ever, to be honest. Up there with the classics like Troll 2, Sharknado, what else is there? The Room, Master of Disguise.
What's up? And welcome to another review. I am here with my brother, James. And I know it's been a while since we've done a review. And you're probably looking at this right here like, what is this? This is the only way can record this properly with two microphones to make it sound better so that it can be good sound quality. Other than that, this is going to be more of a chill type of series. We are back doing reviews once again. And as James continues to heal his headache, we will actually be talking today about A Quiet Place. You may be wondering, why are we reviewing a movie that came out 5 months ago? And our answer is because screw you.
Man, it doesn't feel like it's been that long.
April 9th, 4th, April,
That's
something like that. But anyways, we are going to be reviewing A Quiet Place. If you didn't see A Quiet Place, you got to, basically. You have to. It's basically a requirement. So we're going to be, if you haven't seen our reviews before or are new to the channel, we do usually 3 sections. This new series may be a little bit more open, as in, like, not really doing the set stuff, but our usual focus is on character, production values, and on those are the main 2 things. Usually we'll talk about other stuff, like I'll usually talk about the writing and such, since that's kind of my interest, and we'll just talk about acting and stuff too. It's really just a mishmash of all sorts of stuff that you love about reviews, so we're going to be doing that, and so we are going to get started right away. We'll talk about acting first, and
Usually talk about acting first.
the flow is dead. Shout out to your boy.
We usually talked about story or production first. I can't remember.
Talk about acting first.
Fine.
Talk louder. We're talking about acting first. And that's that. So, I'll let the special guest, who's not a special guest because he's on all the time, but we'll let James talk about acting first. And we'll get started right now.
Wow. Okay. So, acting in this movie, I guess since we're starting with that, I think it's pretty much top-notch all around. I love John Krasinski. I mean, obviously what people most specifically know him for is The Office. And right now, The Office is admittedly getting a little bit diluted. Like, it's gotten sort of blown up everywhere right now. So a lot of people are talking about it. But I feel like that's not all John Krasinski should be known for. He's very good in The Office, for sure. But in this film, not only does he direct it, but he also stars in it. He's basically the main character in it. And he really shocked me. It's not like I didn't think he could pull off a role like this. I definitely thought he could, but he surpassed my expectations, honestly. Much like this movie in general did. It really blew me out of the water. But all of the 4 main cast members in this were really good. But I think John Krasinski really sort of took away as a highlight role of the whole film. I just really liked all that he did. You could tell he cared about his family. and the relationship between him and his wife, and Emily Blunt's character. I cannot remember her name right now. Her character's name right now. Of course, they're husband and wife in real life. But sometimes as an actor, it's hard to play a real life relationship and translate it to a different kind of relationship when you already have a close relationship in real life. So, but John Krasinski was excellent in this film, as was Emily Blunt. I wouldn't really expect anything less from her. She's much more known in the movie industry, whereas Krasinski has been more known for being a part of the television industry, occasionally being involved in some indie movies and whatnot. Um, but Emily Blunt was quite good in this as well. She had a lot of demanding stuff to do in this movie. I'd say she had one of the most intense scenes in the movie involving a bathtub, which was in the trailer, and it was something else. The way she delivered it made the scene so intense and so just white knuckled. And I just felt that she and Krasinski had pretty much perfect chemistry for the whole time they were on screen. I didn't really have a single flaw in regards to their performances, and I think I'd say the same in regards to the child performances too. What is the girl's name? Millicent Simmons was also quite good in this. I'd sort of characterize her as like the heart of this film, and she plays a deaf character, but she's deaf in real life too, which is really cool that they actually got an actor within that community, because you don't usually see like actual minority communities such as the deaf community represented in film. So it was cool to see someone who actually knew what it was like to be deaf, to be in this film. I think there's something to be said for having a character who's actually like what her character is, because it brings a degree of authenticity to the film. And I think that's a lot of what Krasinski was focused on in this film, making it as authentic as it could be in like a horror setting. I just really liked her throughout the film. She had a lot of emotional delivery and some powerful moments. And it was cool how her character sort of connected to the main theme of the movie, about like she is the definition of quiet. She can't speak, but she's also in this environment where she has to be quiet no matter what, and she can't hear herself move or anything, so she has to be even more careful. But I really liked her performance. It was very convincing from beginning to end. And Noah Jupe as the son, Marcus, was also really good. I've seen him in several movies recently. Last year, I saw him in a film called Wonder, and he was really good in that, and he only seems to be getting better. I think he has potential to be a good adult actor if we keep on seeing performances like this from him. So that's really basically the main cast. There's only really 4 main characters in this cast. There's a few side characters, but the 4 main performances in this, pitch perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have much to say on top of that because my thoughts are pretty much the exact same. I wanted to comment on a little bit on Emily Blunt's performance in a different scene than he mentioned. It's kind of in the same sequence, but there's this really intense scene where she is under the house in her basement, and it starts to flood and flood more, and it's this really neat. And I guess I'm going to transition a little bit into story elements and cinematography and camera usage and such, but it's this scene where John Krasinski does a very clever thing in this scene. She has just given birth. There are some spoilers. It's hard to talk about movies a lot without spoilers, so I will give you all a spoiler alert before this happens. So if you haven't seen it, just skip past this part. This is spoilers, though, so just a fair warning. This scene is after she has had a baby. She's in this under her house. John Krasinski has kept her safe, and she realizes it's the scene where the monster of the movie is attacking her, and it's this really tricksy scene. It's in red, all in red coloring, and you see the cradle, and you see it just floating around, and it's actually like you think it's empty because there's a very specific camera angle where it looks like it's empty completely. It's a very very well done scene, and that scene slowly kind of grew to become my favorite scene of the movie because Emily Blunt's hardcore focus on like saving her child is just like it was very representative of what I think would happen in real life, especially in a horror scene such as that one. To clarify, um, I think that the cinematography and the camera usage in A Quiet Place was ingenious. I do believe that it's gonna rank in my top three of all of this year for sure. Just a lot of stuff about it was very ingenious. It took a lot from Stranger Things in many aspects of it, in my opinion, which is a very good thing, obviously. The monster is very, very convincingly like the monster from Stranger Things, which is interesting, but it has very nice design, of course. And I guess those are just some beginning thoughts. But I do think, in terms of the storytelling, which we'll just go to next, Krasinski does very well with making the characters integrate with the world and bringing you into the world in a kind of non-conventional way. Like the first shot of the movie is a stoplight, which is very strange. Like an extreme close-up of a stoplight, but the stoplight's like broken and dusty, and you immediately get a picture of a world that is kind of desolate and alone. And that's very interesting in the sense that you are kind of seeing this world where people have to be quiet. But I'm honestly left with the question of, are there other people in this world, or is it just them? Because they,
do see one other person.
you do see one other person, yes, which is it's just weird because there's this sense of loneliness about this world, about this family, and it's just weird. It's just interesting to me, how you're brought into this world and then just kind of immediately thrown into it. Like the very beginning of the movie, you're thrown into it, and it's a very depressing scene, with obviously John Krasinski's amazing acting and response to that type of deal. So, very, very good storytelling overall, and it has a great arc to it. And the ending is quite shocking. Obviously, we won't reveal that, but all I'll say is that it has a very, very, very surprising shock factor to it. And that's just about all I'll say. I think the story of A Quiet Place is very haunting, and yet at the end, oddly like, not redemptive, I wouldn't say. I can't think of the word, but the beginning and the end are very well rounded together. So that's just my thoughts a little bit on that.
As far as the story goes, I agree with what Joseph said about this movie. Krasinski as a director taking you into the story in a very unconventional way, and just the way that he's able to tell so much of the story visually and not with much talking. Of course, you'd expect that in a movie like this, but there's other movies out there where they have like deaf main characters, or it's supposed to be quiet a lot of the times. Like there's this movie that I believe you saw with me called Hush.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
which isn't a bad movie at all.
That is an excellent Netflix movie on Netflix.
Probably one of the best Netflix originals.
Got to see that.
Netflix original movies, but the difference with that movie, it did have a deaf main character, but it used a lot of dialogue, and it's sort of... I'm not saying it's a bad thing to rely on dialogue, obviously, but it was just interesting to present it in this way. I haven't seen that many movies where it's almost entirely silent. And that's what movies used to have to be, with silent storytelling, so it's interesting to see that style return. and it works especially well for a storytelling movie. I mean, a horror movie, um, because it just makes everything so much more intense. The audience we were watching this with, this movie was quiet from almost beginning to end.
Yeah.
There was hardly any music. You could hear the creaking of the floors they were walking on. You could hear the slightest sound. And because they established that tension from the beginning of everything just being so silent, the audience was respectful of that silence as well. Like, John Krasinski had a way of sucking you into the story. He played the audience right into his hands. He played them every moment, and I loved how he played it. Just having everyone be as silent as they could, like trying to not even breathe, and you could hear a pin drop in the theater. Nobody was even eating their popcorn or anything. It's one of the coolest theater experiences I've had.
Yeah.
But that was just something that I was fascinated with from beginning to end. I don't think I've had such a visceral horror experience since probably The Babadook. Now, of course, there were a lot of good horror movies last year, but this one was just sort of a unique experience in its own that you don't get to see too often.
I did want to commentate a little bit on what you mentioned about, because in a lot of horror movies, especially recently, there are a lot of horror movies. Most of them are bad, granted, but you just have to kind of find the right one. And you mentioned the usage of a certain story element. In horror movies, story elements are very important, because if you don't have a good story element, your horror movie probably won't work, because you can't bring a story entirely based on jump scares. And A Quiet Place's primary storyline was definitely just the quietness of it, obviously, and I do think that the quietness was used expertly. Like, the sound design was amazing. Just everything felt natural. Like, it wasn't weird that they were talking in sign language. None of it was weird, and especially an ingenious scene where it was all quiet, and it's a very intense scene where the little girl is getting stalked by the monster, and it's completely quiet. She has no idea. And that's just kind of one of the ingenious moments in the film, is just using a story element to the benefit of the horror of the movie. That's kind of what makes horror good when it's good. So that's just something I thought I'd commentate on.
And besides, I think most of the horror elements worked really well. If there were any problems I had with this movie, it'd be very small. It'd be like that, there were a few times when there were jump scares and it was a false jump scare. Like, there was a time when there was a jump scare, but it was just a raccoon. There are just a few times when that happened, but it never really detracted from my enjoyment of the movie significantly. But anyway, something else I enjoyed about the storytelling was that at the heart of this horror movie was actually sort of a touching family story. Like, you could tell, and even Krasinski said this, that this movie was sort of a love letter to his own family, and the relationships he has with them. And you can tell because this movie is all about a family surviving together. In the midst of all these horrible things going on, the birth of a child is considered to be a good thing. It's considered to be a redemptive thing. In a lot of apocalyptic movies, usually there's a little bit of a nuance, like, is bringing a child into this world really a good thing, or is it not? But in this movie, Emily Blunt's character being pregnant is constantly celebrated, and I really enjoyed that. And I also just enjoyed how the family cared for each other. Sure, there were conflicts between them, but you could tell each family member cared for one another. Something that happens so often in horror movies that center around families is that the families hate one another in some ways, and there's always conflicts between each of them, so you don't really care if they die or anything, because you're like, none of them are likable anyway, so why should I care if they die, because they're just pawns.
Yeah.
Whereas in this film, you see that they care for one another, and you don't want them to die because you want them to stay together.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciated that about this movie. That's not something you see too often.
Yeah, I did. It's it's very interesting to me. As a filmmaker, Krasinski could have come into this movie and been like, okay, what do I? This movie, the obvious concept was a family. The beginning concept was a love letter to his family. At least that's what I believe it to be. He could have put that into any situation. He could have put a family into any situation. But the uniqueness about this movie is that it's put into a situation of fear. Um, there is, at least in my opinion, I don't know how you feel, but I think there is no situation that brings a family closer together than a a collective sense of survival and a collective sense of fear. It's such a powerful theme, and it's such a powerful image to bring. And I think it's just so unique because of all the story elements brought together under this one roof of a family, like you said, surviving against fear. And I think that's an incredibly powerful theme to have in a horror movie in a film time where not a lot of horror movies have themes. It's mostly just jump scare after jump scare. And but I think that's an incredibly unique thing that this film did.
Yeah. Um, I guess last thing I'll sort of say, because I've almost sort of said what I've wanted to say, is that as far as um, the horror elements go, I feel like they were inspired by a lot of the classics. I got a lot of Alien vibes from this and Tremors, just like these these situations where you're in an isolated setting. There's nothing that can save you, and all you got to do is either run or fight.
Yeah.
And that's just you could tell that Krasinski was inspired by those classics, and he emulated a lot of them, but he didn't replicate them at the same time because he still made something that was entirely unique. Like, you could watch Alien and you could appreciate that A Quiet Place had some inspiration from Alien, specifically in the look of the monsters. But you can also appreciate that A Quiet Place stands entirely on its own, and that's what any good horror movie should do.
It's really commentating on that. It's all about how you use your protagonists, especially when it's not something psychological. When you have an enemy or or an antagonist that is not human, like an Alien or like in A Quiet Place, it's all about how you use your antagonist. It's especially when you're looking at something like comparing this to Alien. Um, Whereas Alien uses its enemy as a quiet thing itself, I think A Quiet Place took that concept and kind of reversed it and used it for its own unique purpose. Because I obviously won't reveal the plot twist, but there's an ingenious plot twist. It's not too shocking when it's revealed, but it is pretty ingenious when you figure out what Krasinski does with the enemies before revealing that and after revealing that.
Yeah.
And I just think the usage of that of a lot of, like I said this before, but this is kind of my culminating thought, that A Quiet Place is unquestionably amazing because of the usage of its plot devices, all meshed together.
Yeah.
So anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, yeah. I think we've just about explored everything that this movie has to offer. You have, obviously you can go see it. It's on DVD now, I believe. And it was, if you didn't see it, if you can't tell, we really genuinely love this movie. Like, we were completely silent when the credits were playing, and it was really shocking to kind of, when a movie does something like make you take in its ending. It's really great when a movie makes you like feel the ending. And that's also something that really happened with It Comes at Night, probably more intensely than this, but still, it did that well. It played the ending really well, and it played itself perfectly. And I think my rating of it would be a pretty much 5 out of 5. I really had no problem with it. Like I said, it's going to be in my top 3. So usually my top 3 are all 5s out of 5s. It's personal preference at that point. But my rating is pretty much perfect. I really found no issue with it. So yeah.
John Krasinski has made an impressive directorial feature. This is actually not his debut, believe it or not. A lot of people have been under the impression that this was his first. It's not. Yeah. But his other films have been more underground. This is his first major feature. Yeah. It was a pleasant surprise to me to see this movie get so much attention and so much audience recognition.
#1 in the box office for 5 weeks in a row.
Yeah. And
that may not be true.
I don't think like 5 weeks.
Something like that.
It was in there for at least 2.
It was 3.
But it's nice when a horror movie that actually deserves it gets recognition. Yeah. We're living in a golden age of horror where the good horror movies do not get the recognition they deserve, and the bad ones often do. But this is not the case. This was a very rare case.
I think it was kind of helped by the fact that it was made by such a popular figure.
Yeah, and Emily Blunt being in it too. Yeah. It definitely helped in that regard. But anyway, this movie is really impressive. Admittedly, on a side note, I'm a little worried about the sequel. There's going to be a sequel out, but I think this movie could have just stood well enough on its own without a sequel, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A one-off. If you want to have just the time to sit down with your friends and watch an intense hour and a half adrenaline rush, frightening ride, then this is the movie for you. I'm going to rate this a 4.5 out of 5. Those just little jump scare issues I had lowered my rating slightly, but this is still a really good film, and it's also within my top 3 right now.
Yeah. Well, that is going to be all for that review. Thank you all always for watching our reviews. We are going to be trying to keep this consistent now. I know it's been a while since we've done a review. Last we did a review of a bad movie. So it's good to come back to start talking about some really good movies and probably some really bad ones in the future. So we'll see. We'll see. So thank you all a lot for watching. If you like this video, you can press the like button, hit the subscribe button for more videos, and we will see you in the next one. Peace out.